Hello, everybody. We will get started in a few minutes. Hi, everybody. We'll just give it another minute and let people get signed on, and then we will get started.
This is Steve Solosic. Can you hear me?
I sure can, Steve. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Great.
Very good.
Okay, well, it is 12:01, so we will go ahead and get started, and hopefully everyone will be able to get joined before we get to the meat of today's meeting. So welcome to today's CEO Office Hours call. This is Michelle McNerney with IWD, and thank you for joining us today. So I'm just gonna advance through the slides here. My email address in case you have lost it. And then just a really quick purpose of what the calls are intended to do. Again, every couple of weeks, just give everyone an opportunity, you all as CEOs, to ask questions regarding all of the work that you're doing, and also be able to just have a dialogue between yourselves and ask for any guidance that you may need. I am going to pause for 1 second, get up and shut my door. I'll be right back. Okay, I apologize. And today, the objectives of our office hour, we have really two things that we're going to go over today. A couple of weeks ago, I emailed you all out the PY19 third quarter performance data. So we're going to review that today and give you a chance to get familiar with that, as that's something that will be coming your way once a quarter and then annually as well. And I also have, I didn't update this slide. It says review fiscal agent training. What we're going to do is review the fiscal agent agreement, and then also, again, give you any opportunities to ask questions. So let's, one more slide just as a reminder that the key tasks that you all have been working on for the past several months, we have moved those deadlines due to COVID-19 and all of the work that we're involved doing that with that right now. So this is just a reminder of those tasks that you need to be working on in your local areas, and the deadlines have been updated to September 1st. Some of you have gotten some of these things ticked off already. Some of you are in the middle of ticking them off, and I am very confident that we're going to get there by this deadline and be able to keep pushing forward with our system transformation. So that's kudos to you all and the work that you're doing. If you have any questions, just let me know. But we're going to start today talking about the program year 19 third quarter performance. So before I switch over to the actual performance data, I just have a couple of slides to talk through some key points regarding performance. And joining me on the call today is my team at IWD from the Workforce Services Division, who are responsible for gathering and doing this reporting. So Michaela, Wendy, Denise, anybody who feels the need to jump in and add anything or correct anything I say, please do so. But as a reminder, the program years for the WIOA programs, which is your Title I Adult Dislocated Worker and Youth, your Title III Wagner Pizer, and then also Titles II and Titles IV. The program year runs July 1st through June 30th. So we are required to report quarterly and annually to the Department of Labor on our performance reporting. So the deadlines for those quarterly reports are as follows. We do quarter one by November 14th, quarter two, February 14th, quarter three, May 15th, which is the information that I sent you recently. And then the fourth quarter information will be due August 14th. The quarterly reports are due 45 days after the end of the quarter to the Department of Labor. And then we also are required each year to do an annual report on the data, which will cover the entire program year from July of PY19. So that started July 1st of 2019 and will be ending here on June 30th of 2020. That annual report is due on October 1st. And we also annually are required to do an annual report narrative, which is due on December 1st. And that's a written report that we submit to the Department of Labor that analyzes the data that has been gathered throughout the program year, gives us an opportunity to brag about the things that we're doing well, and also identify areas where there needs to be improvement and outline some steps that we're going to take to make improvements in that data. So WIOA, when WIOA was put into place and the law was passed in 2014, one of the big changes was the institution of common performance measures. And so what that means is all of those WIOA core programs, the titles 1, 2, 3, and 4, again, Title I is your adult DW youth. Title II is adult education and literacy, which in Iowa is run out of the Department of Education. Title III is your Wagner Pizer. That's also run through IWD at our one-stop centers, the Iowa Work Centers. And then Title IV is vocational rehabilitation, which in Iowa is run out of the VR agency and also our Department for the Blind. All of those programs report out on the same common measures, which is really important because we also all often serve the same customers. So we're really working towards being able to share that data and report that data together so that we're truly capturing all aspects of the services an individual is receiving across the state. So where do the performance levels come from? Well, the performance levels are negotiated with the Department of Labor every 2 years. So we actually just recently completed performance negotiations with the Department of Labor for Titles 1 and 3 on May 27th, so a couple of weeks ago. And we negotiated for PY20 and PY21. So program year 20 will be starting on July 1st. So the next 2 years, we have established what our negotiated rates are. So the state negotiates with the Federal Department of Labor, and then in turn, IWD, representing the state as the designated workforce agency, we will be completing negotiations locally with each local area later this year. So that will probably take place later in the fall once the local boards have all been put into place and certified, because that's something that the local boards and the CEOs will work on with us. So more to come on local performance negotiations, but just know that that is a piece of this process. Another thing to keep in mind is that most of the performance indicators are exit-based, meaning they look at a person's information after they've ended using services through the programs, and where are they post services? Did the services help them gain employment and maintain employment? So the 6 common measures that are used across WIOA programs are employment second quarter after exit, employment fourth quarter after exit, median earnings second quarter after exit, credential attainment, measurable skills gain, and effectiveness in serving employers. So before I look at the actual data, when I forwarded you the performance data a couple of weeks ago, there were several documents attached. And one of the documents was this Word document here. Can you see that, or can you only see the PowerPoint?
Michelle, we can see that.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So there was a Word document titled Primary Indicators of Performance Calculations. And this document will give you a little bit better explanation on what those key indicators of performance mean and how they're calculated. So for example, we're looking at second quarter after exit. We're doing that by taking the number of participants who exited during a period of time, who were found to be employed during that second quarter after they left the program, and dividing that by the total number of participants who exited. So we've established a measure that we want to say, 70% of those people are employed the second quarter after they exit, which would indicate that, the services were successful in getting them either the skills or training or job search assistance they needed to find that job and keep that job. So this document is helpful to give you a little bit more explanation of what that looks like. Additionally, there was another Excel sheet that was sent titled Time Periods for Reporting. And so what this document does, if you had to scroll down to the very bottom, but again, we're talking about program year 2019 performance currently. And so what this does is show you the dates, the date ranges that are used. So people that have exited from these date ranges is what's being included in those quarterly reports. So not too important for your level of understanding, but just so you understand the documents that were sent out and you have that information if you want to dive in. So I'm going to start by pulling up the document. So this is an Excel spreadsheet that actually shows the performance negotiated rates and then what our actual performance levels were. So I'm on the WIOA Adult tab right now. And so what it'll show you is it shows you each individual region's performance, and it also shows you the statewide performance. So for example, employment second quarter after exit, the negotiated rate was 72% for the year. Up until this point, the way that it has worked for the Department of Labor is if we have maintained at least 90% of that negotiated rate, if we're above that level, we were considered to have met and would not be in any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Any sort of issues of having not met our performance and things like that. So as you can see, for the second quarter after exit, in the third quarter, all of our regions individually have at least attained 90% of the negotiated rate, and as a state as well. So we didn't quite get to that full 72%, but we are above the 90% of the negotiated rate. So we're considered to have met that performance guideline. And then you can flow across and see the different performance measures as well. So then you have your employment fourth quarter. The negotiated rate is 70%. It's typically a little bit lower than the employment second quarter because you're looking at people's ability to maintain a job a year, 4 to 5 quarters post exiting from the system and receiving services. So you tend to have some people drop off, and so the negotiated rate's a little bit lower. You're also then looking at your median earnings. So what's the median earnings amount of those people that were employed in the second quarter after exit? Our negotiated rate was $4,900. And as you can see, in Iowa, during a good economy, people were actually making well above that negotiated rate, and we were meeting this performance measure as a state and all individual levels or individual regions. And then you can get into the credential attainment rate over here. Credential attainment rate is specific to our customers that were attending training through the Title I program and the percentage of them that actually attained a credential through that training. So our negotiated rate was 67%, and you can see the ones in red here are regions where they didn't maybe quite get there. As a state, we didn't quite get to the 67%. We were at 66.9, but we were above the 90% of the negotiated, so we're considered to have met. Now, for those of you that see your region maybe showing in red here, and for really all of us, I will say that credential attainment was a new measure put in place under WIOA. And until very recently, this performance measure has not had a lot of historical data to support it. And we're still very much in the discovery phase, I suppose, of how this measure works. And we're working on getting the data adjusted. Also, when we switched to a new case management system last June 3rd, 2019, and the system that we were using before that did not allow for us to capture this credential attainment rate exactly in the correct way under WIOA. So we're still working through some transition issues with this data as well. And I think we're confident that we're going to see this level out and everybody be able to get to these rates. Michaela, is there anything you would want to add about that? Not to put you on the spot, but you're more familiar with it than I am.
No, that is where the credential attainment stands.
Okay, thank you. And so then the last measure is measurable skills gain. And if you'll notice on this one, in the negotiated rate, it still says baseline. And that's because this is also a new performance rate, performance indicator under WIOA. So even though we have some data showing here, we have not negotiated prior for PY19 for measurable skills gain. And the baseline indicates that we were still just gathering some historical data to use to try to be able to set those rates into the future. So, you know, it's a little bit kind of all over the board, again, as this is a new measure and we get used to how to record this and define it within the confines of the law. So across the sheet at the bottom, you'll have different tabs for the different funding streams. So you have your WIOA dislocated worker. So the same measures, employment second, employment fourth, median earnings, credential attainment, and measurable skills gain with the individual regional data and then also the statewide level. And if you'll notice something, I don't know how to make these go away without closing them down completely. Sorry. Even though our negotiated rate was 73% for dislocated workers, we actually as a state achieved 87.7. Same thing for fourth quarter, 71% negotiated rate, but 89.7% of our dislocated worker participants were still employed fourth quarter after they exited. So and the median earnings was much, much higher. And you can kind of see that carrying out across the board. So dislocated workers, people who lost employment, again, I think this data is reflective of a good economy where they were able to go back out and find new jobs relatively quickly and maintain those jobs successfully. You also have your tab for your youth data. And youth data is going to be slightly different because not all youth are utilizing services to get a job. Some of the youth, actually quite a few of the youth probably, are utilizing the services to further education. So the measure is defined a little bit differently for youth because it does include whether they were placed in employment or education or training. So that's slightly different. Sorry, I'm getting a chat here. So Kyle has put in a question. Are those state averages flat averages per region into state numbers, or are all the averages average figure population as well? Michaela, can you help me answer that question? Or how the individual regional numbers roll up into the state number?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, are the state averages flat averages per region into state numbers, or are they average figuring population as well?
I would say they're flat for the region. Is that what you were thinking?
I would think so, yes. I'm not sure, Kyle, I completely understand your question, but we can also maybe talk later if you, and I can figure that out and get a better answer back out to you. But again, if we go back to this sheet, it tells you what the numerator is and what the denominator is in that calculation. So it's really simply taking the number of people who exited that were participants who had earnings versus the total number of people exited. So it's not pulling in population, if that's your question.
Michelle, this is Lori. Let me add something to that. So Kyle, those numbers are only going to be reflective of people in the system and people exiting out of the system. However, your question about adjustments per local area, that sort of gets into the idea that the U.S. Department of Labor every year negotiates performance levels with the state of Iowa, and then IWD is to negotiate performance levels or performance expectations with each of the 9 local areas. The idea that regional impact, you know, what happens in Northwest Iowa and the economy there and what the labor market looks like there may look different than what's in Northeast Iowa or South Central Iowa. That's where that regional customization can come in how the local area negotiates the expected performance rates for their area with IWD. Does that make sense?
Thanks for adding that, Lori. And I will add, and this gets a little into the weeds, but all of the negotiated performance rates are based on what's called a statistical adjustment model. And so every piece of data that we are gathering when we enter somebody into our data management or case management system goes into that calculation. So we ask them questions about all of their barriers, right? So are you homeless? Are you a single parent? Are you disabled, or you have, you know, all of these things that are considered barriers to employment. There's a ton of them. And every one of those factors then gets pulled into that statistical adjustment model to basically benefit you. So the logic would be the more difficult people you are serving, the more barriers to employment those participants have, the lower your rates will be because it's harder to serve them and it's harder to get them to the point where they can successfully maintain employment second and fourth quarter and so on down the line. So the population piece of it gets pulled in when you're talking about those factors. I think that also goes with it. So that's the way that these spreadsheets are designed to work. There's also tabs for the Wagner-Peiser data, which Wagner-Peiser is another program under WIOA, and we don't all talk about it that much because it's run through the state, and through the state employees at Iowa Workforce Development, but they are working very closely with the Title I staff, and all of these core partner programs that are supposed to be represented in the one-stop should be working together to provide wraparound services to people. Mostly the focus of Wagner Pizer is on those, the job readiness skills, the more simple things that don't need as intensive services, and job placements, helping people be matched with employers who are looking for jobs, and a lot of the employer services are run through our Wagner Pizer staff. So also important information that helps us see how we're serving people in the state. You'll also notice a tab for trade. There's a tab here, but it's blank because this data isn't actually required or reported up to the federal level in this way currently. And the same thing for the veterans. So we're gathering some additional specific data for these populations and negotiating rates, but we do it at a statewide level only and not at an individual regional level. So same thing here with trade, right? I believe the federal government is working on a way to get the trade and the veterans data to be able to be reported at the lower local level, but currently it's not available. So are there any more questions about performance data before we would move on? I will say that this is going to be data that will start coming to you on a quarterly basis. And you'll have this available to look at for your individual local areas and also the state. And we can continue to have discussions about it if the more you see it, the more you start to have questions and things like that. But I just thought now is a good time to give you a basic introduction, because this is what you all as CEOs, when you're going through the process of selecting service providers, this is what you're working towards, right? Is gaining these achievements and having service providers that can help you meet these levels of performance and providing those services to your constituents, which so far, I mean, we do a great job in Iowa. So no concerns really from a performance perspective. Any questions about performance? Doesn't seem like it.
Hey, Michelle, this is Michelle, this is Michaela. I don't know if you want to mention, sorry, I'm on the phone, so it's a little bit harder to follow along, but I don't know if you want to mention that some of those rates, especially like credential attainment in some of those smaller regions, don't have a lot of people that go into them. I do have, we'll have something for them that breaks it down by how many were in the numerator and denominator for each of their local areas. So that'll give them a little bit better idea of the numbers that are exiting, that are making up each of those rates.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Michaela. And I think too, that one of the important things about our new data management system that we use is that at a local level, you will have the ability to pull this data and you don't have to wait until it's due for the quarter. You know, you can be pulling this monthly or whatever to work towards making sure, you know, because all of this data comes from the data that is entered into the data management system. So at a local level, the service providers, the case managers, they have the ability to be on top of this to make sure that they're entering data correctly so that it gets reported out correctly. And those are the things that Michaela and the rest of our team work with the local areas on. It sounds crazy because we're a year into this new system, but it is a brand new system. And then we're still getting used to how all of those reports work and how we can make sure that we're using that data as effectively as possible. So, you know, we're continuing to learn and improve on those skills and passing those skills down to the local areas so that we really can stay on top of this and make sure that our data is reflective of the work that we're doing. So more to come. Michaela has been doing some training with the local area staff, and we will maintain that going forward for existing providers, new providers, you know, boards, staff to the boards, whoever needs training, we can set that up and make sure that you have a deep understanding of this data, because at the end of the day, you know, it kind of comes down to this, right? Are we serving people? Are we getting them the skills, the education, the training that they need to have successful careers? So we can provide whatever additional training we need to at some point. Okay, let's talk about fiscal agent agreements. So, as you know, we have been talking for a long time about shared liability agreements and the 2080 agreements, and I think most of you are either done or well on your way to being done with those, which is a phenomenal, huge step. Congratulations to you all. But there's another agreement that we need to put into place, which is called a fiscal agent agreement. And so this slide just really kind of outlines the differences between the two. So the shared liability agreement, as a reminder, is really a document that determines how liability will be shared amongst the CEOs. So only CEOs are a party to that agreement, and it also does a couple other things. It identifies who the CLIO is, it outlines your processes for decision making amongst the CLIO or the CEOs in your local area, and some other things, right? So that is a specific document for the CEOs and how you will function together in your local area. The fiscal agent agreement is a little bit more detailed in the fact that it is going to detail out the roles and responsibilities of the fiscal agent in your local area. And so the CLIO, the local board chair, and the fiscal agent are all going to be parties to that agreement. And it really is designed to make sure that you are all on the same page with what the fiscal agent is going to do and what the CEOs and the board expect to receive from the fiscal agent. So a helpful document, and I think a lot of you have been asking questions about how much should we be paying them. I think once you can detail out what those duties are, that will also help you to determine how you can decide how much they should be paid. So let me go, okay. So I'm gonna pull up I think this is it, okay. So we have just hot off the presses finalized a template for a fiscal agent agreement for you all to use as you work to designate those fiscal agents and get all those details in place. So again, it's designed to be a template where you can sort of insert here the name of the fiscal agent and the name of your local area. But you can also, make this unique to your local area. You don't have to use this template by any stretch of the imagination. I will remind you that there is a policy in our WIOA e-policy manual that is specific to the fiscal agent functions and what they would be required to do. And then you also have the ability to add additional duties if you choose. For example, one of the duties might be that the fiscal agent, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, you could assign the duty of doing the RFP to the fiscal agent if you wanted to. You don't have to by any means. Is that right, Lori?
That is correct.
Yay, thank you. Okay. So really, if I'm not going to read this to you word for word, and it does have a draft watermark on it for right now, but after we can get some feedback from you all, we can finalize it and get it sent out to you. But it talks about how the delegation of responsibilities will work, that the fiscal agent's agreeing to disperse the funds on behalf of the CLIO and the local area. There's general expectations for the administration. It's some of this is boilerplate language, some of it, right? Like you have to comply with the laws and things like that. There's also procedural expectations and service expectations. I believe off the top of my head, reporting expectations. So, asking for reports to be sent. You could make this more specific if you wanted to say specific report names or specific dates, anything like that. And then guaranteeing the separation of duties. Reminder that the liability stays with the CEOs, that this agreement also, the same as the CEO liability agreement, doesn't take the ultimate liability away from the CLIOs and the CEOs. Put an effective date in there, and then also the signatures. And again, so you'll have your fiscal agent, your chief lead elected official, and your local board chair all agreeing to this. Hold on one second. I'm sorry, I have a very dry throat right now. Lori, is there anything that you want to add?
No, just be interested if there are any questions. I know we're just going over it in a real high level, but if you had any specific questions about what might be in it, we could certainly answer those.
Yeah, any questions? No, quiet today. Okay, well, that's the last thing on my agenda for today's meeting. I know that I have spoken to many of you over the last couple of days as we're working on establishing budgets for the PY20 funding allotments. I think those calls have been very helpful for me to be able to move forward. And thank you very much for your participation and engagement in those calls. Are there any other questions you guys have that you want to chat about today since we have some time? Kyle said, when will this be sent out and it's flexible, we can tweak it as needed? Yes, you can always, tweak. The only requirement is that you do it, right? And then we are just providing a template for you all because we know you're working hard to get all this done. And these are documents that we've never used before in the state of Iowa. So the template is just a guide. If you want to make changes, you can make changes as long as it would meet the minimum requirements that are in the policy.
Michelle, this is Jack Willie, and I'm just asking, this will all be explained when we have our fiscal agent training, right? And
Yeah,
we'll go over
go.
this. If we want to add or delete or whatever, we would do that and talk about that at that time.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi, Michelle. This is Heather Garcia.
Hi.
With the conversations about the contract negotiations, let's say that a local area requests a 50-50 split for the first 6 months and the second 6-month contract. What if they need more money for the first 6 months? Is that something that would be renegotiated potentially, or would that be an all-out no?
No, I mean, it is up to you all. It is your money, right? So we will do whatever you tell us to do. And remember, for like in Central Iowa, you're extending the contract. It's happening in many other places in the state. So, this is a little bit of a weird kind of quirk in the road, right? Where we have to do this sort of decision making about how much you'll put into contract because of these temporary contract extensions, right? So even if the existing service provider in your local area is the successful bidder for an RFP, the contract that we're extending through 12/31 is going to end because we have to get the contracts out the correct way, which is IWD to the fiscal agent to the service provider, right? So, doing this sort of negotiation process, and it's not a negotiation because again, it's your money and I'll put whatever amount into contract you tell me. The calls have just been designed to explain that and get that information from you all. So I would say if the decision is we want half of it to go into this temporary contract, and at some point during this first 6 months, they need more money, if your local area tells me to put more money into contract, we will do that, absolutely, because it's not up to us, it's not our money, right? So that's not a problem.
Michelle, can I put a qualifier on what you just said though?
Sure.
That request for additional money has to meet with the approval of the local board and the CLIO.
Right. So when I say you, yes, I'm meaning the local area leadership, the CLIO and the local board would have to approve whatever amount goes into the contract. But if the leadership in the local area says that there needs to be additional money put in, then we will do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
And thanks, Lori.
So there's a question in the chat about how the pilot training is going. And so I'm going to assume that's about the fiscal agent. And so the first round of fiscal agent training is scheduled for next week. So stay tuned. We'll answer that question after that training is done, and it's scheduled for the 17th.
Yeah, and just to kind of tack on to that. So we have 3 local areas right now who have designated a fiscal agent officially. So their fiscal agents are going to be attending training starting next week. It's a 2-part training. So mayor and mayor will provide the initial training these aren't the right words necessarily, but it's more the policy related, right? What is a fiscal agent and what are you going to do and why are you doing it and that kind of information. The second part will be the following week, and that will be hosted by IWG fiscal management staff, and they will be actually going over the system that is used by the fiscal agents to request the drawdowns and report expenditures. So she's going to be doing some hands-on training with them for how to use that system, okay? Everybody else who has not designated a fiscal agent yet, don't fret, that is perfectly acceptable. As we looked at that initial slide, right? Let me back up and zoom back to it. The deadline for you to appoint a fiscal agent is September 1st. So we're going to plan on doing a second round of the exact same training. Well, let me rephrase that. It'll be better the second time around, right? Because we'll have done it once and we'll have learned and made it better. And the people who are going next week can attend again. So don't worry, you'll get to go and it's better too. But we'll probably aim to do fiscal agent training at the end of August, beginning of September, so that all the fiscal agents are given that training and have that information to be able to start the duties, and for you all to be able to start that RFP process throughout the fall. Any other questions today?
Wow, this is easy.
Man, this is good because I've been talking nonstop for a day and a half, and I think my voice is finally starting to give out a little bit. So thank you.
You're just thorough.
Okay, well, then that concludes today's office hours calls. I know I am behind on getting some of these office hours recordings and PowerPoints posted. I will get those updated next week on the website so that there will all be out there. I apologize. And then I will send out this template of the fiscal agent agreement later on today. So you'll have that and you can start working through that. And if you have questions as you do, obviously just please let me know. And thank you all. Again, I hope it's going to be a beautiful weekend and I hope you all get to enjoy it.
Thank you.